Hello, and welcome to an overview of the Quiet Assistive Technology Transition Indicators. My name is Gail Bowser, and I work as an independent consultant in special education, and in particular in the area of assistive technology. I'm also a member of the Quiet leadership team. Our area for today is assistive technology transition, and that area addresses the making of plans for students who use AT as they move from one setting to another. I wanted to emphasize here that the settings that we're talking about are both the big transitions that are required by IDEA from Part C to Part B services, and then also the transition from school services to community services. But also these indicators apply to all the other little transitions from class to class or from school to school that students encounter throughout their educational career. In these transitions, people from different programs, different classrooms, or maybe even different agencies work together to ensure that there's continuity of assistive technology use. And one important part of that continuity is making sure that there are advocacy and self-advocacy services included for the student who's making the transition. There are 6 quality indicators for assistive technology transitions, and the number 1 indicator is that any transition plan that's made for a student should address the assistive technology that that student needs. It's actually the most common error that people make transition plans for students but don't mention the assistive technology that the student needs. So it can tend to get lost in the transition. One way to address that issue is indicator number 2, where we want to empower students to participate in their own transition planning, and particularly the planning around how they will use assistive technology in their new environment. If the student can't be a self-advocate, then indicator 3 comes into play, and we make sure that there are advocates for the student's use of assistive technology in both the sending environment and the receiving environment, and as often as possible, that parents are a part of that advocacy initiative. Indicator number 4 talks about the actual tasks in the new environment and what kinds of things the student will be doing. So we need to know what kinds of technology is used in the new environment. Is it the same technology that was in the initial school program, or is it a new kind of technology? Are we moving from iPads to Chromebooks or something like that? And those kinds of things need to be addressed early on. And those kinds of things also affect indicator number 5, which is that students need to have an individualized timeline that addresses their assistive technology needs. One thing we know about transition planning is that sometimes assistive technology isn't addressed until the very last minute in the student's transition plan, and that can be problematic if there's a lot to do. The final indicator, equipment, training, and funding issues need to be addressed, is the one that people tend to think of first when they think about assistive technology transitions. And what we know is that while those areas are important, knowing how to move the equipment and who's going to pay for it and what kind of training the new staff needs are important, it's critical that the first 5 indicators are also addressed in a transition plan for a student who uses assistive technology. There's some big ideas about assistive technology transitions that I think are really important. So I'd like to share those with you today and encourage you to read the guiding document about assistive technology transition that's included on the Quiet website. There really are 3 types of transition activities. There are device-specific activities, activities that the IEP team is procedurally required to implement, and then also activities that the student and family need to be involved in order to ensure continuity, because it's the student and the family who will be always present in the new environment. So device-specific activities are things like the bullet points on this slide, arranging the transfer of technology. If it's going to move from one environment to another, make sure it has all its parts. Create artifacts to demonstrate the current level of AT use and independence. So what does it look like when the student's using their assistive technology? What kind of work do they do with that technology? Identifying any new technology that may be needed in the future setting. We've talked about that a little bit already. And identify sources of funding for the new technology if that's required. The final item, again, gets back to that issue of advocacy and self-advocacy. We need to identify someone who understands how the student uses assistive technology in the initial environment and how that technology will be used or changed in the receiving environment. There are also required IEP team planning activities, and some of the kinds of things that might help you to develop a transition plan for your student who uses assistive technology are observing in the future setting with an eye to how will this fit into the new environment? Can it be the same technology the student's already using? Where do you plug things in? Things like that. Also, in order to get more information like that, you may want to meet with the staff from the sending environment and the receiving environment to just have some good conversations that aren't happening when there's a lot, when school is in session and there's a lot going on in a classroom. A final IEP team activity that can be really important is arranging for enrollment or access to needed non-school services. That might be vocational rehabilitation or developmental disability services, or sometimes even Medicare or Medicaid services for the students so that they can access needed assistive technology. Finally, student and family activities. Under student and family activities, we think it's important that the student develop as much independence as possible in their use of assistive technology. So they need to have not only ability to operate the assistive technology and do the tasks for which the technology was selected, but also to know how to explain it to other people and decide when to use their assistive technology independently. In order to think about that more carefully, students and their families need to visit future settings and figure out what that environment is going to be like and how much help they really will get. And they need to develop as much as possible self-determination skills for their own self-advocacy. I've mentioned self-determination and self-advocacy several times, so I wanted to give you this list of skills from Michael Waymeyer, who is an expert in transition in general and has done a fair amount of work in assistive technology transition. He lists these 6 skill areas: choice-making, decision-making, problem-solving, goal setting, self-regulation, and self-advocacy as essential self-determination skills. And for each of these skill areas, there are assistive technology actions that we might be able to begin teaching our students as early as possible so that they are self-determined assistive technology users when they move from one environment to another. For next steps, I think it's important that you begin planning as early as possible for any transition that's going to happen, so that environments and the student and other team members will be prepared when the transition does occur. Also, if you represent an agency, we want to suggest that you develop a process or a form to ensure that all elements of AT transitions are addressed by IEP teams. And we have a sample of a form like that for you in our resource document and on the Quiet website. Also, I want to encourage you again to go back and review that list of self-determination skills and include them in the instructional programs of all students who use assistive technology at as early an age as possible. So even a very young student can identify when they need to use their assistive technology, ask for help with it, choose what color they want their wheelchair to be, all kinds of things like that, that lead into self-determination and self-advocacy skills. What we know is that competent assistive technology use and implementation in a school program does not guarantee that in a new environment it will carry over. It's important to do some planning so that there's as much continuity as possible in the new environment. And the students' coordinated set of activities should include a focus on AT use. In order to do that, there are specific actions that AT teams can take to help ensure that continuity of AT use after a transition. And hopefully you've gotten several ideas as we've talked today about the kinds of actions that you might take as a team. We have a bunch of resources for you. This is a list of the transition for assistive technology resources that are on the Quiet website. There are the quality indicators, the self-evaluation matrix, and the transition planning worksheet that I've referred to several times. But I also wanted to point out to you this list of supplemental resources about assistive technology transitions, so that you might be able to delve more deeply into this topic and get the information you need to plan effective assistive technology transitions for your students. Thank you for joining me today. These are the direct links to the Quiet website, the Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology Manual, Comprehensive Guide to Assistive Technology Services, and the email address for the Quiet Leadership Team. I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and thank you for joining me today.